Hey everybody, JEM Schofield, and I'm here with Ryan Booth, and we are going to talk a little bit about lighting. So why don't you walk me through a little bit about when you basically busted through the door and had like an hour to just sort of start to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
what you started to decide.
I'm about 2 hours into seeing what the space looks like. And so the first thing is just kind of, fortunately, Ryan kind of had everything dressed already, so there's not a lot of imagining that has to happen from a production standpoint.
Right.
And I feel like the production design, for me at least, is a lot of, I mean, obviously, that tends to be my starting place. And just seeing the way that kind of the light in the room is falling.
Mm-hmm.
So when I walked in, there's overheads cranked on, all the lights are on in the space.
Yeah.
And so that's actually really helpful to just kind of see how, like, what's kind of already happening in here and seeing if that's something that we can build on.
Well, let me ask you, what's your order? So you basically see whatever practicals are on in the space,
Yeah.
and see where the light's falling. Do you then start thinking about putting lights up, or is your first thing to put a camera up? Do you get a monitor up? You know, what's your process? Because everybody has a different way of doing it.
Yeah, I have a monitor that I bring with me on basically every shoot that I go on. That's kind of my kind of unofficial eye.
Yeah.
And so that's usually the first thing I'll do is try and get a camera up, try and get the monitor up. So at least I got picture. Okay. I'm looking at picture. And then obviously have to make a color temperature decision right away.
Yeah. I see a lot of tungsten light.
Yeah.
Or that color temperature in the space.
Sure.
So you would normally think of that for an interior space, but you're talking about the fact that there's this part in this interior where we're going to get this blast of essentially daylight.
Yeah.
So you're playing off of daylight to begin with, but you have so much tungsten in here. So how do you think about that? How do you think about setting your camera's color temperature? Because I'm feeling a lot of warm light in here right now, and only that little glow that's coming off of the monitor.
Yeah, so this is actually, the monitor, which is actually an LED that we're doing our own little lighting gag there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's actually the only daylight source in the room. So for me, I think obviously there's shape and contrast that you can get, but then there's color contrast, which I actually think about color contrast before I think about shape contrast. And so I know that we're going to have a huge contrast with the daylight that comes in later. So I actually want this to be an exaggerated, warm kind of tungsten feel in here. So all the tungsten lights are on dimmers in here, and so we're well under 3200.
So it's even warmer.
So it's even warmer. Yeah, we're probably at like 2700 Kelvin with most of the lights in here. And the walls are wood. Like, this feels like a cabin that you know, I mean, we've all been in cabins like this before. It would not make sense for it to feel like a daylight, you know, space. So it feels very warm, very kind of, this is his kind of command center where he's like, you know, kind of, this is his safe place. And so we've got everything feeling nice and warm in here.
Right. But then how do you play that in terms of where you set your color temperature on your camera system?
So, I mean, that's literally like between the monitor and the camera, we just kind of start dialing until it feels right. Basically.
Feels right for what you're seeing here, and then you're going to leave it that way and then just let that blue blast come in. And what do you have the camera set to?
We're at 4900 right now.
So you'll leave that, which is going to make this look even warmer.
Yep.
As warm as it is.
Yep.
But then when this daylight comes in, we get this blast, which is obviously going to be 56 or above in terms of color temperature.
Yeah.
Then you're kind of splitting the difference there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we definitely want to exaggerate the blue, kind of make the kind of blast from the UFO ship feel a little bit kind of, you know, not like daylight, but actually like there's a little bit of blue in the light. Yeah. And so, yeah, if we'll kind of drop below the 56, because we're going to use HMIs as our kind of UFO light. Yeah. And those sit above 5600, even though they say they're 5600, they're not.
So when you say you're dropping below in the camera. Yeah. So as soon as our motivated light is basically above the color temperature of that, then we're going to obviously read bluer in terms of our image. And right now, because our color temperature is set to such a high Kelvin in relation to this, we're going to see a warmer color.
Definitely.
So you're really pushing that in terms of color.
For sure.
Yeah.
But part of the reason that we can get away with it is because he has the laptop screen on, and so it's keeping his face kind of a little, you know, less warm, obviously, than the rest of the environment. So it kind of it serves to separate him from kind of the rest of the space. So it's a little bit interesting, but then also it's going to be, you know, kind of make his skin look more like normal,
Yeah.
I guess.
And that's just basically a small LED panel.
Yeah, that I
you're
didn't
using.
know that we had. So
Right. From
yeah.
a home improvement store.
Yeah.
It's not even,
No,
you
that's
know,
it.
yeah.
And I would say too, I mean, and that's how I tend to light anyway. So the light above that's kind of adding some just general ambient fill
Yep.
is actually just the ceiling fan that was on the second we walked in
Right.
the
And then I
place.
saw you turned it off.
Turned it off.
Yep.
But it just felt like that, you know, there's just a little, it just adds just enough to the walls and kind of defines a bit that I feel like it brought up the ambient enough that
Yep.
rather than me going and grabbing a 1K and bouncing it off the ceiling, like it's already working. So we threw some diffusion over it and we'll go for it.
Good.
Sounds great.
So over here you have this light bar, which is what is that and what is it doing in terms of the scene?
Sure, this is actually something that Ryan made. I have one of my own as well because it's actually this really cool. There's spot flood bulbs you can buy at Home Depot, but kind of when you put them next to each other, it creates this quote unquote soft hard light.
Right.
And so it's really cool in this space where we knew we wanted to put a bunch of practicals and lamps on the walls and hanging that for us, we'll be able to wing this around in the space to just give a nice kind of glow wherever kind of our character ends up because we have motivated light from basically all sides. So we can kind of wing that tungsten around wherever we want to. So
cool. So what are you using in terms of your custom picture for the camera?
So I tend to actually just shoot in CP Cinema Lock, which then is just kind of the standard C-Log.
So for people out there who haven't actually used the camera system, one of the things that's really nice is if you want to shoot with Canon Log, which you've done a lot, is if you're, especially in a multicam situation where you're pulling cameras out of a rental house, you can basically just set up the cameras, go into camera setup, choose CP Cinema Lock. You don't have to go into the custom picture menu, which will let you paint and really tweak things. But if you can just turn that on, then you know that all of the cameras are going to match in terms of their custom picture. Yeah. That's really nice. Have you used the, well, you haven't because you haven't used it. So now there's another thing that we have, which is you can send LUTs over HDMI. So you've used View Assist probably on the Cinema EOS cameras. So you go into the menu and then under the video setup menu, you'll see HDMI and you have to have Canon Log activated in order to do this. So we turned on CP Cinema Lock. So when we go into LUT and then you'll see setting and now we can turn that on. And then over on that monitor that you have over at the Village, if we turn that on, you'll immediately see that there's a change over there. And then once it's on, you can choose whether or not you're pushing a 709 or you can actually, I don't know if you've ever used wide dynamic range, but you can actually push a wide dynamic range LUT over there. Yeah, that's great. Which a little less aggressive in some respects, but it's, you know, obviously protecting the highlights a little bit more. Sure. So it just depends on, you know, what you want.
I mean, that's helpful, I think, for sure, because I would say when we're rolling takes, I like to look at C-Log, but I'm definitely like, I mean, if I have the option, I'll definitely toggle between, you know, I'll throw a 709 on there just to kind of see what kind of ballpark we're living in. Even if I know that the grade's going to end up looking different, it's nice to just have a feel for like what the top and bottom end of the range is at the moment, you know. So.
But you know the gotcha. If you're sending it over HDMI, if you're sending it to a recorder, then you're going to record the LUT. So I've turned it off. And then, I don't know if you've seen this, but Ryan and I were talking about earlier on the new OLED display.
Yeah, it's great.
Great for outside.
Definitely.
And then you're familiar with an EVF like this, but you've never seen it on the C100.
I know. This makes me happy for sure, because that was definitely, especially when you're working on a shoot where you may be shooting C300 and C100 on the same shoot, it was always kind of a little bit of a bummer to drop down to the EVF. So having a kind of that EVF is awesome for sure. Yeah. It looks great.
No, it's definitely a big improvement, I think. Cool. So anything else that we need to go over in terms of your lighting or anything else in terms of things that you want to tell people about in terms of your approach? I mean, you like to use a lot of practical lighting.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I tend to want to make it look like there's, you know, that I didn't put up a bunch of lights. Yeah. And so that tends to be kind of the main goal for sure, is throw a monitor up, put the camera up, and now try and kind of add in practicals or move things around to kind of make it kind of enhance what's already happening.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're using color as your first consideration as well.
Definitely,
which is not something that everybody does.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Booth.
You bet.
Cool.